And we're back. Hey guys, Nick Piet, Chief Evangelist here at Talend.
Mark Balkanay, Director of Technical Product Marketing at Talend.
And we're here to kick off the second day of the Summer of Open Source, right? So I'm going to turn the volume real quick. I've got us on chat. If anyone wants to ask questions, you can. I've got it on my phone. Otherwise, we can start talking about this. So I know we had talked about doing some stuff with Google for the second episode, and we're working on some great stuff with them. But we had something really great come out. We felt that we wanted to shift the show just a little bit, and that would be our recent release of Gartner's recent release of their Magic Quadrant.
Yes.
Right, and finding Talend as a leader in that space, specifically the open source components as well. So we figured, hey, how better to celebrate that release than an episode talking about how Mark and I are really pissing off our IT team here at Talend with some of our... No.
Maybe you are.
Right, no, of course. All kidding aside, guys.
The IT team loves me. I do free work for them.
Right, so yeah, we're back in full shadow IT. So we're going to be talking about some of the great ways that open source technologies like Talend Open Studio can help solve some of those pesky challenges.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Want to note, though, that the Talent's really gone all in on us.
It's true.
We now have T-shirts, and it says staff on the back.
We now have official staff T-shirts, right? The summer camp itself.
And a mug.
Yeah. Well, where's your hat, actually?
I'm not wearing the hat.
No, you gotta wear the hat.
No.
Put it on.
I'm not. This is not my favorite hat.
Here we go. So
that's
when you're riding the big rig. So yeah, camp's in full session. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them out in the Facebook chat. Otherwise, other than that, we can start.
I also noticed, Nick, you didn't bring alcohol to camp again.
You know,
so I guess we're going to have to do another craft beer and data recording so I can get some beer out of you.
You know, I think that's fine. Between that and the T-shirt, you know, you're going to have a full closet full of clothes. You're welcome.
It's great. A whole new wardrobe of T-shirts. It's great.
But yeah, so as Mark kind of mentioned, we also have a series where it's a little more...
A lot more fun.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's as fun as developing live.
Right. No stress or anything, right? No, yeah, you're right. If you haven't had a chance to look at our Craft Beer and Data series, it's another series that Mark and I put on where we talk about industry problems. I'm going to start bringing some guests onto the show. So if there's anyone out in the universe that's interested in being a part of that, please let us know. We'll happily
check it out. Hashtag craft beer and data.
Yep, craft beer and data. So
good series.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, with that being said, as we do with every session, we'll start off and kind of introduce the Talend Studio. All right, take it away, Mark.
All right, so I'm doing the pleasures today. Let me get acclimated here a little bit. So. All right, so welcome everybody. Again, it's Mark Balkanay here to show you how to do some development in Talend. All right, so this is the TOS Open Studio for data integration, and just walk through what you're seeing here in a little bit more detail. So over here on the left side is our repository within the Eclipse Development Studio. Where you keep all the metadata about your data integration jobs. So you build your jobs, you can categorize them and keep the different versions of them here. There's other great pieces of code or metadata within the repository as well. The context variables is a great place to have to make reusable variables across your jobs, and I'm going to show that later on in the jobs how you can take advantage of some of these context variables and load them dynamically. Also, metadata section within the TOS DI Studio where you keep track of connection information about databases. So for example, here we have a Redshift database and some information about it. The metadata about the date dimension table that I'm going to use as well. So it's not only stores the metadata, but I can drag and drop these onto the palette or onto the design window and easily use them for inputs or outputs and write to. And as you can see, there's all kinds of different connection metadata, and these are all provide wizards that help you connect to those different systems or types of source and targets. And then from there, we go, we get a little more room for the mouse. All right, so from there, you have, on the far right is our palette. So if you've seen any of our marketing material, most certainly you've seen something about the 900 components that Talend has. And a good majority of the 900 components, actually one of the things I have to do is do a count of how many are in TOS versus how many are in the enterprise. But a good number of those 900 are right here in the TOS studio. And they're categorized by the type of component. So, if you're doing cloud or database, for example, there's just the sheer number of database connection capabilities within the free open source studio is just amazing in itself. So a lot of capabilities, and again, it's a drag and drop environment. So if I want to add something, I just drag it and add it to the design window. So very easy. And then once you have the components, this is an example of a job that Nick is going to actually develop for you. And typically the way you work through the building a job, and we'll walk through this as I build mine, is you go from left to right. So your source of data will start on the left side, and then the data flows through the process all the way to the right to a target eventually. And then as you work on the components, you can highlight a component like I did here. And down below is where you configure the component. So you start adding in the information you want. And then also down below you can run the job and test it. So let's get started. I'm going to close your job, Nick. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, but before we do, let's take a quick step back, right? And let's quickly talk about the challenge. So, right,
the picture now.
You know, okay. How about over here? No, here's good. The whole kind of concept of this episode was around projects that we could make work in our enterprise using an open source product.
Yep.
Right. So, before we jump in and start building, what was the challenge that you were trying to solve?
I was just getting ready to tell you about that, but let me tell you all about it. So, the marketing team and needed to know all the download numbers for our products.
Okay.
And we offer TOS out on SourceForge.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll show you the APIs and what it looks like from SourceForge. So SourceForge is a website that offers code, and I'm guessing most people watching this know that, but
right.
You can actually download free products and the actual code for the free products from SourceForge. SourceForge provides an API for you to get reporting metrics on the data. Now, they have nice, APIs. You can do a month count, or you can do a quarter count. Of course, our marketing people and the analysts who designing the reports, they want a day. They want to go to the daily grain, or the fine grain of the report would be a daily metric across all of our products. And we offer, skipping my mind now, something like 7 different TOS products out there. So DI, big data, MDM, data quality, data prep, ESB. We have all the majority of our products. There's only one that we don't offer, but on open source. But the rest of them have a open source version to them that you can use free. And so what I'm going to show you is how I take the JSON data from the API and parse it. First, I'm going to show you how I can parse a single day's worth of data request the data from the API, parse it, put it into some columns that are meaningful for reporting,
right.
And then I'm going to also show you some pretty powerful piece of code or job that is more of an orchestration of how to then take that one job and run it repeatedly with different days and products in it.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool.
So this is how I implemented loading daily download reports from SourceForge into our Redshift database at Talend.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll have as much luck as you did last time.
I don't think so. Just prepare for several errors and debugging.
Right.
So.
It's a live build session, of course, right? I mean, it can't be as great as me.
This is I can't. You're right. This is a little bit more complex, I think, than last time, and It's also dealing with JSON, which, you know, not Jason the guy, but JSON, which is not my friend either. So I have love-hate relationships with JSON. So,
All right, well,
should I get started?
why don't you jump into the build?
Get out of my way then.
All right, I'm out of your way. I'm out of your way.
All right. So first we're going to create a new job. And again, last time I showed this, but in case you're new, there's different ways you can create a job to get started. You can either right-click on a folder, you can right-click on job designs, you can even go up here and say create a job in the top, and it'll ask where do you want the job, and you say which folder, or I want to create it in my data warehouse folder. So we're going to give it a name, get source. I'm also the worst speller in the world. So that is fun on live development. Can't go Google things. Alright, so I started out with a blank palette, and before we get started with the job, let's show you what happened to Chrome. You closed Chrome?
No, you can read it. Here, let's reopen it. I did not think I did.
Chrome closed. I had some of these pre-opened, but no worries. So I did.
Let's reset them. All right, where do you need to go?
All right. So we're going to go out to SourceForge. Let's see if it remembers I had some of these open. Hopefully it opens right in here. Of course not. So here's an example of a download report for a few days of August of Talend data integration. So this is what we really want to replicate in our CDW or in Redshift, is a table that gives us the product, the date, and the count.
Right.
So that's what we want to do. And again, SourceForge has some nice APIs, and I'm not going to bore you with the API, but I'll show you what it looks like if we were to take an example of the I don't know where your insert key is on your keyboard. So if you look at the, sorry, I'm using Nick's awesome computer. But if you take the APIs and give it the product name, which is Talent Studio, and then the start date and end date, it returns the JSON. And I've already copied this JSON into Notepad++ just to show you what it looks like. But we want to take this and turn this into an operational job. So, I don't want to drop my laptop.
You got it.
What happened? We're working in tight quarters here at the Denver office. So if you look at the JSON that we have here, it looks like something like this, where it has the country, the count, and it'll have some period information and date and things like that. So some a little bit hairy JSON, nothing too crazy. It also tells you the OS if we want to know that. But what we want to do is basically get the count of the country and the downloads and the period or the day that it was done. So let's get started with that. And we're going to, again, a shortcut or a fast way to find a component that you may want is to just start typing. Click in the design window and start typing what you want. I want to do a file input from JSON. And now I want to configure this component. I'm going to do a JSON path without a loop. And I'm going to do a URL. I'm just going to paste in that exact URL that I just put into the Chrome browser. with the information hard-coded. We'll come back later when we get this working the way we want, and I'll show you how we're going to use parameters to change the URL with the product and the date. But let's get this working first. So we have to add some fields that we want to look at. So I just click on the Edit Schema button here in case you missed it, and I did it really fast, and then I added some columns. I'm just going to give them some names. First thing I'm going to call is bad array because it is kind of a bad array to deal with. And then the other, I'm going to work on the actual fields that I want. So I want to know what period was the data being reported from SourceForge. So whether it's daily, monthly, quarterly. I want the totals. Make sure I misspelled period. And then the poll date. So what date is this for? Okay, and it's all JSON, so I'm going to just keep it all strings, keep it simple. And then I need to parse the actual JSON message to get what I want. So I'm going to do a little bit JSON querying here. Is everything okay, Nick? Audio, sound?
I believe so. We're all good.
All right. I'm going to copy this because I have to use this over. I also do not like typing, which Nick has learned. I'm all about copying and pasting if I can. All right, so we're just going to go through. This is why I'm only doing 4, because I have to do this 4 times. So the bad array is the country, where it's the country and the date, and I have to do some fancy work to get those split out later on. But the period is called period. And the totals are called total. And this is called the start date, I believe. So now I just want to test this and see what it looks like. So we're going to do what's called a log row out. This is a great little component that is great for helping debug. And now I'm connecting the JSON component to the log row out. If you missed it, I'll do it again. I'm just clicking on the JSON component in the design window. There's different ways of doing it. Again, you can right click on here, or you can click on this little design shape here with a 0 in it and drag it over to the next component, which is my log row. And again, the log row, what that does is going to show the output of the flow, the data integration job, in the console here. So let's just see what this looks like if it works. Again, expect many little
drum roll, if you will,
little issues here and there, but let's see. Hey, it didn't fail, so that's cool. So let's see if I got kind of what I'm looking for. So the bad array is the list of countries with the counts in one field. And if I go all the way to the right, hey, first time. I don't think I got it first time in any of my practice runs, Nick. But I can see that I have the daily is the period. This is the count, which is interesting, and it's not the count I want to put in my database, but it's the count, overall count for this particular period. So it's summed it up for me, SourceForge has. And then the start data, the poll date, and I did a range so that I can see multiple records. So now I really want to start working on this bad array to split it out. So let's do, let's add another component. So we're just going to remove the line between the log row, and we're going to add another JSON component called extract JSON fields. And really what I want to do is start making these rows. So I'm going to right click, show you another way to connect. And when you right click on a component, you get lots of different options. You can do what's called the row. So every row coming from this particular component, what do you want to do? I want the main row, which is the main data coming in here. And now I want to do some configuration on this. So the first thing I want to do is sync all the fields. So I want all the data to come in here. And I want to work on the bad array JSON field. And I just want to pull out the individual rows for each one of these so that I can see the count per country. So I'm going to, again, just do a little bit of JSON querying. And the only one I really need to work on is this column, the bad array. Where is the insert?
Doesn't exist.
Okay, great. All right, so I think that will give me a little bit better results. So again, let's do the output and run again. So this is kind of how I do my development, Nick, is I kind of take one step at a time, get what I want, and then keep going until I progress to the end result. So rather than trying to build a whole bunch of components and then trying to debug it in the middle somewhere and not knowing exactly where it happened. So this is just the Mark Balkanetti technique. All right, awesome. So now you can see much better results where I have the country, the count, and the period. So now I need to split this out. I'm going to use what's called a T-map and a little bit of Java. I'm going to show you how you can take advantage of some Java functions within Talend without having to necessarily know a lot of Java, which I do not. And I think Nick can attest to that I don't know a lot of Java. I usually have to phone a friend. But let me show you now how I want to split and get the actual count versus this totals that's coming from the JSON. So again, we're going to remove this. We're going to add a T-map. And we're going to take all the fields, and it automatically propagates. So the T-map is a very powerful component within Talend. It pretty much does everything you want it to do. You can do expression building. You can map to multiple outputs. You can split things out. You can do conditional format, conditional if-then-else statements for certain outputs. Very powerful component. It's been worked on for years. It was in Talend 10 years ago, even longer than that actually. So it's got a lot of capabilities, and I'm going to show you some of the basic stuff here. Okay, so we're going to add a new output. We're going to call it ready, because when I'm done with this, it's going to be ready to write to a database. So it's ready out. So now I have something on the right, and I have my inputs on the left. I'm going to drag and drop the fields I want over here. So that's building my schema. I actually don't want this totals though, because I'm going to get a new total, and then I'm going to add a couple new fields. One called country, or countries, and another one called product, because eventually I need to know what product this is writing out to, whether it's TOS DI or TOS Studio as it's called on SourceForge, or TOS Big Data. So now I want to do a little splitting out or removing some stuff. I'm going to use a variable. So this is something that you can work on in between source or target mapping, and create a variable, and I'm going to call this var normalizing it or cleaning it up. So we're going to go in and we're going to add the bad array, and again, Talend is a Java generating tool, so you get all the advantages of Java with Talend, which is pretty powerful. So I can just do, knowing this is a string, I can do a replace all, and that was not what I was expecting. Did I get the right one? Let's make sure I got the right one. One second. Like I said, I'm not a Java expert. All right, so we'll do this again. I think that was right. So again, when you do the period, it brings up all the different functions that are available to you. And I'm going to do a replace all. That's what I was expecting, was regex. So then it tells you what are the things that this Java function is looking for. So this is looking for a regex. and I happen to just know the regex off the top of my head. I want to remove the square brackets that come with that array so that I can have some cleaner data so I can get to country and the count. So to do that, I will do the brackets are a control character in Java, so you have to do what are they called, Nick? The escape characters. So I'm going to first look for the forward bracket, and then a pipe to do an OR, and then escape characters for the back bracket, and that should do it for that. And I want to replace it, so if I click on replace, just with nothing. So I'm going to do 2 double quotes together. So that'll give me, take the bat array out, and I now have the country and the count separated by comma. So we're going to do another little function here to get the country out first. A function called split, and with split it just wants to know what are you splitting on, so it's comma. And then it's an array once it splits it out. So the country is the first one, which Java arrays start at 0. We're going to copy this, and we're going to put it in totals. No insert key. Whoops. And then the second one is the count. We're going to leave product null for now because I'll show you that in a minute. So let's test this all out. That was quite a bit of work there. Let's see if it all works. Let's see if I have it in kind of in the order I want. So it's a little easier to read if the count is after the country. I'm going to put the period last because we don't really care about that so much. So that just orders how the data comes out to my console, or the database. Not necessarily the database, but to the console at least. And that's something I always do. So I don't want to create a new one. If you just click on it and drag this over, it assumes you want to create a new output, and I don't. I want to use the one I just created, so I have to right click on the component, find the ready out one that I just set up as an output. I need to also sync columns because I changed the columns a little bit. So let's run this and give it a shot and see what happens. Alright, so now you can see down here, if I make this a little bigger for everybody, you can see I have the country, the count from the array that was country and count, the poll date and the period, and the product will fill in a second. So I'm doing good. This is getting closer to what my customer data warehouse people, analysts wanted in Redshift. So that's awesome. So let's keep going. So the next thing I want to do is parameterize that's easy for you, easy to say, parameterize.
Yeah,
I want to put in some parameters around the country and the start date. So I'm going to use context variables for that. Something Nick showed me, and I've been working with Talend for 6 years.
Yeah.
So Talend for 6 years. Wow. Almost, yeah, 6. And he showed me that I can drag and drop context variables that have been defined onto the design window, and it adds it to my job. So we're going to try that out. First, we're going to look at it. I have a context global. These are called global context variables, meaning they can be shared or used across all different jobs. So it's called SourceForge controls, and that's what I'm going to use it for. So for this particular example, I want to set a default, but I have 2 variables, one called toss product, and the first time we're going to do is studio, toss studio, which is the UI, or the one I'm using right now actually, that I've downloaded. And I want to do it for 2017 August. Hope your computer doesn't start on fire, it's pretty warm. And we'll just do it for August 1st. So these are the poll date and the product that I want to pull. So again, this will be static for this time, but I'm going to show you how we make this dynamic. All right. So yes, I want to propagate that. So if you change a global context variable, it will automatically update any jobs that have it in there, which I don't have it used. So let's see if Nick is accurate. If I just drag and drop this over here, it's going to add these to my context. Very cool, Nick.
I wouldn't lead you astray, Mark.
6 years, and I didn't know you could do that. The other way to do it, which is how I always have done it, is there's a little clipboard with a checkbox down here. You go in and it brings them all up, and you can select what you want. And you can see that I already have SourceForge. So what this is giving me some context variables that I can use and assign dynamically at runtime, even per runtime, which I'll show you how you can orchestrate that, or how I use these to orchestrate it. So I'm going to go back to the JSON input component, and we're going to change this URL to use the context variable. So in the URL, this is the product that I'm querying to get the results. I'm going to change that to the variable, the context variable that I just set up. Again, this is a string and it's Java, so we need to break it. So in order to break it, you need double quotes, and then to append, you need plus signs on each side. I'm going to copy that because I need that again here in a minute. And then another shortcut, and I wish we had like little things that like the key pop up while we're doing this live, that would be cool. But I'm doing, if you just start typing and then do control space in the studio, it'll bring up any context variables that are available to you, or any variables, whether they're Java or global map variables within the studio. So I want to put in the context toss product here. And then I want to set the date using the context variable as well, so I can set that on the fly. So we're going to remove that. We're going to insert my double quotes on each side and plus signs on each side. And we're going to add the poll dates. And then at the end, we're going to do that as well. In the end, we just need a plus sign, because it'll be the end of the string and nothing after it other than the date. So I did this enough. Hopefully everybody caught what I was doing. So again, what the objective is to have global variables, which I'll have another job in a second. I'll start building a second job that...
Just add your plus.
Ah, thanks, Nick.
No
You are paying attention.
Always.
But anyway, back to what I was trying to say before Nick corrected me, like he loves doing.
No, never. Just saving. We got to keep that. You see a pitch in a perfect game. You got to make sure he throws the right strike.
It's not going to happen. Anyway, so what I've done is taken this hard-coded URL and I'm putting variables in there that I can then assign on the fly. We'll show you how to do that in the next job that I'm going to create. So I'm putting in a variable for the product that I'm querying from SourceForge and the start and end dates. In this case, I just want a day worth of activity because that is the grain of the reports that we're building in our CDW, is how many downloads for this product on this particular day. So let's go ahead and test it out again by just running it, getting the output to the console, and see what happens. Hopefully it looks good because it didn't fail right away. So thank you, Nick, for catching the plus. So down here again, you can see the country, the totals, the period, the product, which I should add right now, the period or the pull date, and then was it daily. So for the August 1st, looks like India has had the most downloads for TOS DI on August 1st, which I think you'll see a lot of trend where India is the highest downloaders right now of our TOS products, which is interesting. So let's go into the team app and just add the product in here. Again,
So while you're working on that, Mark, we had a quick question come in on the Facebook channel from Arvind Mohan, and he was asking, is Talend compatible with Git?
well, so the TOS products, you can't store the repository objects in Git and pull them in and out.
Right.
You can obviously store the back-end files on Git, but it's a lot of work. So our enterprise product, we provide a collaboration between developers with Git.
Okay.
So yes and no. TOS, not
Right,
very
yeah,
well.
yeah. So for what
enterprise,
we're,
yes.
Yes, exactly. So Arvind, to answer your question, yes, with our enterprise stack, we certainly have Git compatibility.
Maybe for the next live stream, you could give me a mouse that is less buttons on it, not so much stuff.
You know, I forget at your age how many,
Yes,
how many
I'm
shiny
old.
things just distract you.
Thanks, Nick. So
Yeah.
now I have, I put the wrong thing in the product, and this is exactly why you test. I think it was because you were asking me a question, Nick. I'm sure.
Okay. It's probably true.
So I put the poll date context variable instead of the product context variable. So thank you, Nick, for distracting me and ruining my perfect record already. All right, so we want whatever the context variable for the TOS products are in there. All right, so let's get good, and that's why you test. So run it.
There you go.
Great. So now I have the country, the count, the product name that I'm looking for, date, and daily. So let's now go to the next step and build that orchestration job that I was talking about. That's going to pull a whole period of days using this particular job that we just made for all the products. All right. We're just going to do it for 2 today, just to give you an idea, and we'll do it for like a month of time. All right. So we're going to create another job. We're going to do it this way this time. We're going to call it the master download control. Alright, so we're going to start out. So the cool thing you can do with Talend as well is you can, in the flow of data, you can assign the context variables different values as it's running.
Right.
So that's exactly what we're going to do. And you can iterate over loops. So one way, a nice little trick that I've learned over the years is using fixed flow for something like this. So this is a component where you can pass values through that you can just type in here, which, I have 6 or 7 values that I want to pass, so it's actually a pretty good use of it. So that's what we're going to use here. 1 second. And so we're going to create the schema first, and context variables are nothing more than key value pairs basically in the Java. All right, so you need a key field and you need a value field to assign. And in fixed flow, you can do what's called an inline table, so it really just makes it look like it's coming from any source or target that you normally, or any source anyway, that you normally would use. We're going to add 2 here, and the key is the name of the context variable that I have. So the first thing I want to assign is the TOS product context variable. Again, if I can spell, double quotes, always forget that as well. So again, what I'm trying to accomplish is to assign the context variable TOS product certain values. So the first time I want to run through using the value Talent Studio, and the next time, so what I'm going to do is iterate over this, and I'll show you how you can do an iterative looping on the job, so I can run through this one at a time. The next product I want is, I believe, called Talend Big Data. Checking my notes. Big Data. So this is the Big Data Studio that has more components around our big data connection capabilities and things. All right, so that looks good. So let's add it to the context. So let's assign the context. So again, just going to type in context, and I have a couple components. One called tContextLoad. And this does exactly that, and it has a schema, predefined schema that you can't change, and it's looking for a key and a value, which is exactly what my fixed flow has. So I'm going to push it into that. So for every row of this is going to assign the context variable toss products, whatever the row value is. So Talent Studio and Big Data. Of course, these context variables can't have multiple values loaded to them, so I have to process it one at a time. So we're going to use an orchestration component down here in the orchestration folder. There's a lot of awesome capabilities that I know some of our competitors can't do very well. I'm not going to name them, but in even our TOS products, you can do some looping, pre-post job settings, infinite loop. So if you want to have something running forever, looping and looping, we actually give you that capability, but not by accident, but on purpose. Isn't that awesome? I want to use the flow to iterate. So for every row that comes from my fixed flow input, I'm going to iterate over that and do the following things, which I will build next. So what I want to do is I need a way to get a calendar of dates for this, so I can give a date parameter. I have a date dimension table in my Redshift database, and I have that metadata already set up. So I showed this at the beginning, but in case you didn't make it for the beginning and you're just logging in now and see this awesome development work, this is the metadata in the repository, and I already have a connection set up to my Redshift. I can open this metadata quickly and show you, what it looks like. And in that metadata, I've already pulled in a couple schemas, and I have one for my X dimension. So I'm going to click on it and drag it onto my design window. When you do that with this metadata, it gives you all the possible options that you can do with that particular piece of metadata. So I can make it an input, I can make it an output, meaning I can input means I can read from, so just a kind of a naming standard out of Talent. If the component says input, it means it's inputting data into the flow. If it's called output, it means it's writing data out of the flow, typically into the source, into the target, sorry. And then anything else, I could do connection, I could do an output bulk execute. So in Redshift, that is where you write the data to a S3 file and it does a copy. And you don't need to know the copy code and syntax, it does it automatically. I just want to read the data from here. So I'm going to put this in here. And I'm going to put a little if statement or where statement in here. So that I know, I'm going to give it a date range, actually, just so you don't have to watch me painfully type it all. I already have it here in my cheat sheet. So we're going to put this where clause that has some hard-coded dates in it. And again, you could easily set these dates as parameters, which I have where it runs on a regular basis. So I'm just going to put these hard-coded values in for now for the demonstration today, but I'm going to go from August 8th to the August 15th of 2017, so I can see what that looks like. Make sure you don't have too many double quotes. Oops, or remove the W. Somehow I've still not gotten these fancy gaming keyboards. All right. Alright, so what this is again, it's just my dimension table. It has all the dates for the last 20 years plus 20 years forward or so, I think is what's in there. So this I can use to get the pull date that I want, and I can iterate over this. So for each product, so if I right click and the flow to iterate is exactly that, I would connect it to my Redshift component that's pulling dates, and again in this case it's going to pull the first 15 days of August because that's what I put in the where clause, and so for each product that's in here, so for Talent Studio it's going to go through and run 15 records, or the however many days I select the month of August, through the next flow, and in that flow I want to set the context variable of the pull date that is used in the other job. So we're going to use, again, a tmap for that. Again, tmap is super duper powerful. I'm going to show you a cool function within tmap as well, or within Talend function that you can use anywhere in Talend. And I'm almost done, Nick, so you're going to take over on your example here soon. You said I could take as long as I wanted, though.
You can.
So again, here I just need two columns, one called key and one called value, because I'm just setting context variables dynamically. And the value will be the date. But the date had a specific format, so we're going to format that using one of the Talend date formatting functions. So in the expression builder, which is this little ellipse here, brings up your expression builder. I'm going to make sure my cursor is in front of the date. And there's a lot of predefined functions in here which are very helpful, and I'm going to use the Talend date. And in here, I know there's a format date, which takes a string pattern and a date field, so that's exactly what I want. And it preloads it with a nice example, which is pretty close to what I need. I just need the date, I don't need the time. And I also don't need, I'm going to use a row input, which is a date field from my Redshift time dimension table. So that's formatting my date to be year, month, day with dashes, which is what the SourceForge URL is looking for. So that's perfect. I need to tell it what context value I want to populate with this, which is pull dates, I think. And we'll see if I get that right. So again, what I'm doing is preloading, or I'm loading on every row or every run of this particular flow the date from which the range I've pulled it. So it's going to be August 1st, August 2nd, August 3rd, all the way up to whatever I set the high value. So all we need now, again, is the context load. And we want the context date out into this. And the next thing I want to do is, again, I want to iterate over each row here. So if you just type flow to iterate, it brings up that component that I found earlier, which is right here. And this time I'm iterating over each date that comes from Redshift. And what I want to iterate to is the job I built earlier. So I'm going to run the job from earlier. So there's a nice component there called run job. And what this does is exactly that, is it's going to run a job that you point it to. So I want to iterate every date. So for each product and every date, I'm going to run the job that I built when we first started. So you can open this up and select the Get SourceForge Daily job. Very important, because the whole idea of this is setting the context, is this little checkbox here that says transmit whole context. Very important. And that is going to send the, that aren't here. Didn't I do that?
Not in this job.
Oh, I didn't do it in this job?
No.
Very important, better do that, because that's what I'm setting. Yeah, I think I forgot that every time I practice building this job too. So I need to add these context variables, obviously, because that's what I'm setting. So this flow here, this top flow, is going to set the toss products based on what's in my fixed flow component. And this bottom flow is going to set the date component, or the pull dates, for what I want to pull. And it's going to run this job. So I think it's ready to test, so let's test the job.
Let's do this.
So hopefully, if it runs correctly, we'll see multiple days and multiple products in the output. And then I have one last cool thing to show you, and you can take over.
Cool, man. Looking good. I'm seeing data.
All right, let's see. Well, actually, I'll write it out in Redshift. That would probably be most useful.
Probably.
So now you can see I have the product, big data, multiple dates for the product that are being run. Here's if we scroll up, we'll see studio again, some more data from the studio with multiple dates, first, second, third. So it's working perfectly. It's getting my iterative dates from my dimension table, looping over those dates, running the sub job, pulling the data from SourceForge. So the last thing I need to do really is to put this into my database. So let's do that quickly. And then actually, you know what I wanted to show the viewers? Very cool that we provide this in TOS. But I can make this process a bit parallel.
Really?
So if you click on the iterative loop, I don't want to make this one parallel because it'll confuse the context variable of the product. But for the part that's going over the date writing to the database,
right,
I can have that write as thread as many times as possible. So if you click on the iterative loop between the tflow to iterate to whatever you're going to, and go to the components, there is a checkbox to enable parallel execution. Easy for me to say. I'm going to change it to 3, not 23. I definitely don't need 23. It's kill your machine. So I'm going to have 3 executions running at the same time. So I think I have about 15. Yeah, I have 15 dates being pulled for each product right now, and it's going to run 3 executions of those dates into the database, as long as your database can handle multi-threaded loads, which most databases can. So let's go ahead and run this quick and see that, and then we'll add the last step to create the table in Redshift, and I'll show you the data in Redshift. So now you can see here it's executing all the threads multiple times. So I've sped up the write out to my database by executing in parallel more than one thread.
Yep.
All right, so let's go ahead and add it to my Redshift database. So I'm going to do a Redshift output. And I'm going to remove this. So when I dragged and dropped that over and I selected the input, it gave me all the wonderful metadata I need to connect. And now I'm going to tell it I'm going to change this to built-in just for this purpose today. I want to write it to staging, schema, and I'm going to create the table on the fly actually using this component. So we're going to call it staging. Hopefully my DBA over there is not watching this. SourceForge. Because this is our live database download. Alright. Yeah. So that's the table name. An action, I want to create table if it does not exist. So the first time this runs, it won't exist. The rest of the time, it'll just ignore that. So we're going to connect the tmap. We're also going to sync that actually automatically sync the schema. So that'll create the schema for Redshift, which may not be the best way to do that, but because Redshift has some very cool compressions. But just for today, we're going to run this in here just to make sure it runs here first. So again, constantly testing my development.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So now, hopefully this didn't close. So if I refresh my staging table, I should see a new table called, which is here, and I'm just using a workbench to query Redshift, which is a Amazon AWS data warehousing database on their services. So if we run this, we should see the few records that we loaded. So there's the few records from the test job. Let's go ahead and now run it with the master control job with all 15 days for 2 products. All right. So now I won't have any output to the console, but I'll see a whole lot more data in my Redshift. And this is exactly what we implemented, here at Talend to load this data into our Redshift, our CDW Redshift database.
Right. And it's really great to see just how easy it was for us to kind of build this using this open source studio. And we're out to the races, and all of a sudden this type of information can get to our sales team, our marketing teams, all kinds of stuff like that.
So just the iteration, when I'm on the second product now, I'm going through all the dates on the 10th, 15th date, inserting data into Redshift. So once this completes, which I know down here, the end line shows up, everything looks good, I had no errors. If I go back and I re-execute, I'll have all the data. So there you go. Big data, the data is pulled daily. My country data is not looking so clean, but I could use some of our other tools to clean the country data, put it to country codes and things like that. But that's that is from beginning to end really how I implemented literally for our IT department the process to load the SourceForge reporting information into our CDW so that we can report on the number of downloads we're getting from SourceForge, which we don't control, obviously. That's another company, another site, so we have to use their APIs. This was a great example of exactly how you can pull JSON data from a URL like they provide, how to parse the JSON, how to then also write a orchestrating job that will loop over certain things, set context variables for you. You're ready to go.
That's pretty awesome.
All right.
All right. So we'll jump back into here. I think it's probably a good point to pause, ask the community that's out there if there's any questions. Obviously we like to keep this very interactive as we're building these jobs. If there's anything that you guys have, I know there's a slight delay between this and the live stream. We'll pause for a moment before we start kicking off the second job.
Any questions?
It's popped up just yet.
I'll be here for a while at camp, so.
Right, the camp counselors will be here. No, yeah, I'm looking forward to, not to jump ahead too early, but I'm looking forward to our next episode where we're focusing on some of the capabilities we have with Microsoft. That'll be real nice. So.
I'm watching the stream.
Yeah, right, as we're talking and we're kind of looking, all right, cool. So why don't we switch off then, and we can talk about like what the second job was, which is more of like what I was having to do. So. Helping run the Talend community, one of the things that we really wanted to do was promote areas for our partners to be able to communicate and collaborate across the organization. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how do we create subboards specific to like our partners, like Cap, Gemini, Cognizant, people like that. So the system that we use, which is Lithium, today has a very manual process of kind of adding roles and responsibilities to users in a one-by-one fashion. And so we needed to find a way, if we were going to certainly support this type of requirement from our partner team, to figure out how to actually automate this process. And so, I was like, hey, look, this would be a great thing for me to build with TOS. So we'll be showing you how you can use, again, more REST APIs to kind of interact with and define some of the components to be able to build a job that could interact with Lithium. So, here we go.
Oh, question?
We have a question.
I hope I can answer it.
It's true. I think. So the question was asked: can you open the properties of the Redshift component? I just wanted to look at the where clause on how the parameter is being passed to it from the iterate component.
So the Redshift actually is not receiving parameters, but it would be the same. It would be done the exact same way as I'm doing it in the other components. So if I want to put the pull date in here, but this is controlling the pull date, but if I wanted to pass a date range in here, I would then set a context variables, high and low date, and you would add, you would do it just like you were, in the other components. So, whoops. So you just bring up your, whatever the context variable is. Again, you have to open and close the quotes in the SQL in these override here. Oh, nobody can see what I'm doing. We need shift.
Yep, that's fine. Here we go.
Sorry, I was trying to show you. So here's there was a date here. Hold on, let's see. So to replace, for example, this date with the context variable, which is exactly what I did in the production job, so I can pass in a range. Again, you just do double quotes with the plus sign and put the context variable in here. And again, I have an order by, so I need another plus sign and another double quote to then get the order by statement. And I would do that for both dates. I would have a high date and a low date that I want to pass into my Redshift query, which is what I did in the production job. So that's how you would control the date within the Redshift SQL. And it's exactly what I did in the production job. So I just didn't do it here today, but very similar thing. Take advantage of those context variables. They're very useful in many places. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Gonna just quickly type on this, see if Basker has any more questions before we jump on over. Trying to watch this from my phone is always fun to manage these. Answer your question. JSKR. Okay, perfect. Okay, all right. So why don't I jump over and I'll start building that job that we were just talking about. Yeah, clean up your mess, Mark. It's very important. All right, so
I'll get out of your way, Nick.
much appreciated, my friend.
I'll come back when you're done. If you ever finish.
Ooh. All right. So
I did pretty good, Nick. I didn't have a lot of errors, actually.
No, you did. I mean,
surprising.
It's the fun stuff about this is that you get to build this on the fly and no safety net. It's always a good time. All right. So I'm gonna pull up a couple pieces here, and we'll start going. So as Mark mentioned before, right? I'm in the studio. For those of you who might be joining us at this point now, very quick and easy kind of overview of what we're working with. Over here in the left-hand area, you have kind of the repository, which keeps track of all of the jobs, any types of context variables, which are essentially kind of global variables you can be working with, as Mark showed you, between jobs and even within subjobs and things like that. And then we have metadata specific to the sources and targets and maybe lookups that we're working with. I mean, Talend is a very metadata-driven tool, so that way you can kind of run with some of that stuff. So I'm going to clear out some of the jobs that he did. Yes, I'll save the changes. And let's create a new job. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to create a new folder, and this is going to be live lithium. So I can keep some of these things separated as we're building through. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a job. And so in this case, I wanted to modify user lithium. Right, and kind of come in here. That's actually not going to like those dashes, so I will put those there. And of course, let's give a purpose and description so that if anyone is kind of looking at this moving forward, they can understand what I was doing. So this is to add roles to users in Lithium. We'll work with the REST API to collect user ID before adding or removing permissions. All right? So I've kind of set that in place. Now, how Lithium works is there's two APIs that are available. We're going to be working with the version 1 API, and that's largely just due to some of the simplicity that it offers within managing sessions, as well as then just kind of what I needed to grab, and it was very easy within the Lithium version 1 API. So the first step I'm going to have to do in this process is start building a job using the canvas overlay and interfacing with some of the components in the palette. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is I already have some of these login details specified. So you can see my username, password. I'm going to have a session token that I'm actually going to store in the session profile, or sorry, in my context variables, as well as the role ID. In this particular case, we're going to be just working with one file for one company, and I kind of know what the role ID is, but it is something that we could definitely look at as a future iteration of this application to try to figure out how we can make that a little bit more dynamic as well. All right, so as Mark showed you, I'm just going to very easily, as I start this process, just say, yep, I want all my context loaded, validate that they're there. So now I have all the variables I might need to work with. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is build a job to actually log in and get access to that session token. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to use trest as my source point, and I'm going to go into the component. And when I build these types of jobs, I like to make it explainable on the canvas.
You're saying I know.
I'm not saying anything, Mark. I'm just making sure that the viewers, if they're catching late, can kind of figure it out. So now in this particular case, we're going to log in using REST API v1. All right. So I'm going to go into the component itself. Into this component, go to the basic settings. Now, for you to be able to log on using the version 1 REST API, it needs to be a post, right? It could be GET or POST. If I needed some more advanced things, I could. But the big thing I'm going to just be typing in here now is the URL. And I'm actually going to copy and paste it just to save us some time, at least certain sections of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of grab this section, right? And I'm going to get rid of the quotation marks here, because it essentially is the basic REST authentication API. Now, as you kind of noticed in my context, I had username as password, and they're passwords, so they're hidden, which is great for, one, demonstrating this on a live stream, but also, two, making sure that there's a level of security in place for some of those passwords and things like that. I know other tools I've worked with tend to keep that a little open text, and it can be somewhat disconcerting, especially when you're in front of hundreds of people doing a live stream. So, all right. So we're going to come in here, and the first thing is going to say is like, okay, look, I need the user login. So as Mark kind of did before, and I'm going to do again, and kind of come in here, hit start typing context, hit control space, and then I'm going to say I want the username. Now I'm also going to add some additional information within this and come up with the user password. So I'm also going to need that too. And then finally, I'm going to add the context password to this, right? So at this point now, I very quickly just kind of set up this REST call. And as Mark kind of showed you before, I can click on here and pick that main row, which should be the response I'm getting back. And I am going to use a tlog row. And I'm just again, just to test to make sure that I can copy and paste right.
So that was just another way that Nick just did it. When I develop, I typically, I think it's just because I've been using Talend for so long that I usually add the component and then connect, where Nick actually showed another way of adding the component from one component to the next, where you do click on that link, drag and let go, and then it'll start, it'll either offer suggestions actually on what you could potentially link to that first component, or it'll have like some of the most recent ones used. So
right.
That was another way of doing it that Nick just showed you that I don't do when I develop, because that's actually a fairly new feature.
Yeah, it's a really nice feature that we have. So now, one of the things that I also do that I like as well is, so you see you have this like tlog row here. All right, the next step I want to do is take what I just was able to grab, and let's go to txml, extract a field. This is largely because the responses that came back was in an XML format. And so I'm going to kind of, again, come into the component, let's name it, and this is just a label format, if you will. And I can kind of come in here and I'm going to say extract session ID. Actually, just follow naming or spelling convention. ID. All right, so now you know that I'm going to be extracting that. What I also find, and I do this a lot in my projects because sometimes you have to go back and forth, is I can just deactivate this log row right here, and it will pass it through as we're building this. And so if I need to turn this back on later on as I'm testing, maybe a different API header or things like that, I can then turn these things back on and off as I need. Now, within this loop path, as you kind of saw from the run job, I got a response, and there could be a number of different responses depending on how this is running. So for my XPath loop query, I'm just going to use response, right? And say, give me every response you find. And then I'm going to edit the schema, and I'm going to add one column, which I need, which is going to be the session ID. I'll keep it as a string. Okay. Now the XQuery path for this is just value, right? And I can save this off because it's essentially everything I needed from this. And in this particular case, because I know that it's working, if I really wanted to be super conservative, I could just, again, create a new log row and just run it and see what happens. So this particular case now I should be able to get the message out. Yep, and you can kind of see now that is my session key. Now, in this type of job, one of the things that I want to do is, and how I define this, now a couple pieces that we'll be talking from an architectural point of view. These session keys, at least for Lithium, last for about 30 minutes. The particular job that I am building is not something that is going to be running all day, every day, all the time. And so for those of you who are watching who are wondering, like, how am I going to manage the timeout of these sessions or things like that, I think the simplicity of the application doesn't require me to. But there are ways through some of those orchestration components that Mark showed you in his job that you could design something to reset the token if you ever ran into an error condition that showed that the token has expired. But for my sake, I don't necessarily need to do that. What I'm going to be doing here is now kind of setting a context variable for this session code so I can use it in a different subjob. Now, another consideration as you're architecting the solution is the thread safety underneath between context variables and other components. For my job, I'm building a single threaded application, so using the context variable is okay. But as you saw with Mark, in certain cases where if I'm trying to change the session token because of a timeout, and I have parallel threads running at the same time interfacing with that variable, I'm going to want to use the global map type components, which we can show in a later episode, just as some of these architectural points that we can bring up as we're building these, so that if you're out there trying to build something similar at the same time, you got to get some of this information. So right now, as I mentioned, I just need to go into my tmap. I have my session ID here. Now there's two pieces to this, right? And one of them is going to be, actually I only need one variable, but I need this, which is the context session. Okay. And within this, I need two columns. One is called key. The other one is value. So what I want to set in here is a string for session ID. Now I'm going to do a quick check just to be sure, because the value of the key when applying a context variable needs to be the same. So you see I said session token, not session ID. So it's a good thing I checked, otherwise it would have kind of sat there and gone, wait, what's going on? And so token is what I need. And it's very easy once I've kind of set this to say, hey, that's the key. I want this session ID to be the value. and we can kind of go off to the races. And then the next thing I want to do is take that path to a tContext load. And this is essentially loading token context variable. All right. So very quickly, just to kind of summarize where we were with this again, I'm calling most types of standard REST APIs to log in, providing my login credentials, extracting out the session ID, getting it into the columns that I need to be able to then load the context variable. So that's kind of the first job. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I'm building these as well is if I want to leave some notes for people to read, if someone has to pick this up, I can kind of come in here and can set the text, right? So, Mark, don't touch.
That's not very nice, Dave.
Right, you know, I got to put boundaries on you sometimes, man. This sub job is for collects session token for later use. All right, and then just to make sure that it's there for the whole time, I can spread this out, and it's right there, right? You're gonna have to spend the next half hour looking at that, Mark.
Thanks.
No problem. All right.
Great.
So one of the other things that we can do is if we want to start kind of defining some of the order at which these paths take, I can use some of these triggers. Now what I want to do is make sure that the entire sub job is okay. And so what I'm actually going to do here is make sure that I trigger, I wanted to trigger here. And say, look, I want this whole thing to go before I do something different. And what I can do on this is actually, I could fill this out, but one of the things that I'm going to want to do in the next job is actually start taking the user IDs and working with them. So I'm going to go into my metadata section, and I already have this kind of users defined, and it only has 2 columns. We wanted to make sure that this was really easy for people to work with, and so from that we just wanted to make sure, hey, give us your email and then define, is this someone you want to add or is this somebody that you want to remove? And so it should be pretty easy, but I'm going to drag this file over and say, yeah, you know, look, because of this metadata, I want to use an input file delimited. In this particular case, because I had defined it, it knows what the file looks like. And so in this kind of example, I'll give Mark and I some permissions on the community site.
You're giving me permissions on the community site?
I know.
Awesome.
It's scary.
I can't wait.
It's scary. All right, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is take this row and kind of run through, and we're going to say, look, I'm going to use a TREST client, and I'm going to come into this, and I'm going to start defining some of what I'm looking for. So again, it's another post command. The URL, as you can kind of see, I'm just going to copy and paste. Now, it's actually really interesting because as I kind of built this before, I had some different pieces. But what I can do here is I can actually interface with this row by defining kind of that object structure. So if I want the row for.email address and status, I can kind of come in here and I can take this and define it. Now I also believe I need to do, yes, I'm going to need to add one more piece to this, which is the session, API session key. Now one thing that we can do here is I can also define my query parameters inside this component. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to say I need one more of these, I'm going to say that it's the REST session API, and then I can kind of come in here and say context. Ooh. Here we go, CON. And I'm going to take that session token, which I defined here, and use. So then what I'm going to take is this row, take the response, take it to a tlog row, just to be safe. Again, stickler for making sure that as people are watching this, it's very easy to follow. So I'm going to say that we're, finding a user based on their email. And that's what the REST API that I'm working with inside Lithium does. So kind of community gives us the tag. It says, look, find a user with this email, and let's kind of push it out. So the next thing right before I do is I want to take this on sub job OK and combine it here, saying that this job's going to run first, then my second job's going to sit here.
So Nick, when you right-click again on the triggers.
Yep.
So right-click on the triggers again.
Okay.
So I know you mentioned this before, but just to make sure they understand the difference between on sub job OK versus on component OK. I don't think you did you go into that?
No,
so the on sub job OK is this entire stream, this entire flow. This is a sub job, and this one blue box has to finish successfully before it triggers the next sub job. Versus the on component OK means once this component completes, then start the next sub job. So there is a pretty big difference if you want the entire upper flow to finish before you start the second one, or just that REST call completes successfully. It doesn't matter what happens after that. You can start the next flow.
Right.
So there is we give you a lot of flexibility around that. So
that's true. Yeah, that's a very valid point. All right. So let's run through this again. Make sure I did everything right. You'll see us kind of grab that token. All right, runs to the first. And then we see a bunch of different information. Because you can see in this case, we got two responses. Because again, I said I'm going to set some stuff for Mark, and I'm going to set some stuff for me. So we both have access into this. Ooh, hello from Brazil. That is weird. Thank you, Sergio. Glad you guys could join us. Love that we're getting some people. Yeah, in Brazil. That's perfect, right? Okay. So now that I kind of see this big response, and I'm going to be looking at, each one looks like it's trying to figure out. Yep. All right. So each one is its own response with its own user. Okay, so since it's going to run through each row, I really only need to look at each user. So I can say, look, the next step, again, take main, XML extract, or extract XML. I'm going to hide this because we know it's there. So I need to extract the user ID from XML. All right. So if I go back to the run job, just kind of look at what I'm looking for. Should be this ID right here, right? So that helps me in defining this by coming back in here and saying, look, I want each user, and in this particular case, I then again just need a kind of column, and that is the user ID. And I'll save it, and the path is just ID. Right. So now that we have the ID, the next thing that I want to do is start actually creating and kind of figuring out what we need to do. So you kind of have this row 6 here, and this one has the, I'm actually going to want to use row 4 because I have the status code here. This provides a way to kind of look at it from this, which I could use the same thing. But now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, all right, now that I have the application key, we're going to do another REST call. And what we're going to do in this particular case is we're going to either add or remove permissions based on status. Now this is something really cool that I found as we're kind of building this together. So I'm going to walk through how to build it, and then I might copy and paste it over again just to make sure we get the right one. But in the URL, one of the things that I wanted to do was, as you mentioned, I had add or remove permissioning controls. And that was something that we were able to extract out of row 4. Now, one of the things that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to do some string handling. Can actually grab it. So let's just type it all the way out then. String handling dot trim, and this is where I'm going to say, look, I want row 4 dot status. So we're saying, hey, the row 4, if there's any kind of mismatch or people forgot to indent it right, that's fine. But then I'm going to come in here and say equals, and say, look, if there, does it equal add? So I'm going to use a ternary operator to ask this question. Now, what that means is that if it's true, I want to run a different, I'm going to run this REST call, and I'm going to pull it over and copy and paste because it's quite long. Right? And say, look. And so I'm going to walk through what I just did. So it's saying, if this condition is true, I want to call this call. Now, I should preface what I'm doing is probably not best practice because oftentimes different API calls are going to give you different responses. Within the Lithium API, it tends to be a success or failure pass on that. And so we're going to make sure like I can do what I'm planning to do because the response tends to be the same. And so what I've done is essentially here's the REST call. I've taken the role ID, which I specified, which is in this case, the cognizant board. And I'm going to add a user, and I'm specifying the user ID as in this particular case, I actually want this to be row 7.user_ID. So I'd kind of given it, so row 7. Jump in here, user ID. All right, and then you can see I have my context session code token as well. This is another post call to connect to it. And in this particular case, I'm going to go and just take the response, another tlog row, just to make sure that I'm not crazy. And we'll set it off.
I don't know if the tlog row will tell you whether you're crazy or not, Nick.
Yeah,
you'll get your response.
It's certainly nope, and of course, all right.
Hey, I didn't get one of those.
Right, no, I know. Okay, so now we need to figure out what I had done wrong.
I think we know which staffer needs to work a little bit more on their development.
It's true. In fact, what I'm going to do is, let's see. If I want to look at the error here, I think I just forgot to add some stuff. Yep. Okay. So I'd accidentally, as I was messing with this, had forgot to put the plus sign mark.
Can you?
Sorry.
Oh, you already cleared it.
I'm gonna take. Oh.
I wanted you to show the users how you got that error again because that's
okay.
Another little a lot of hidden gems here that we're showing you. So maybe next time you can run.
No,
the plus mark.
I'll fail it. I just took it out again. I'm gonna
remember
that plus mark I gave you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use it on mine.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention enough.
Right. So that's how I kind of looked at it here. Was that it said like the token user add role user ID. Right. It's saying like, look, it's expecting something here. So it gives me a good indication of where to look. Now, if I have closed that out and then I forget, I can click on this error section and pull it back up again. So it's really easy for me to find again. Is that what you wanted to show me?
Yep.
All right.
I just wanted the people watching to see it because that's, again, a nice little trick that you wouldn't necessarily know. So
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I hope we're giving people watching this a lot of good tips and tricks, and there's a lot of little hidden things in the studio to make the developer even more productive. So, and we definitely are trying to highlight those things, those tips and tricks to make things much more productive for you, while Nick fixes his other error that he just got.
Right, so what we're going to do here, and this is actually another way that I can break this apart and kind of test things, is as you saw, I deleted the path. Now what I'm going to want to do is I can click on this component as I'm kind of testing this out and just say deactivate this for right now. Let's make sure I'm getting the log out the way I want. make sure that user ID or ID is actually giving me the right data.
So what he did was actually deactivated the entire sub job.
Mm-hmm.
So that blue square box represents another sub job. You can click on any one of the components, or right click on it, and say deactivate either the component or the entire sub job, which is very helpful.
Right.
And it won't run that at runtime. It ignores that code.
Right, exactly.
No matter how bad it is.
All right, so let's run from here. Let's see what we get back as the response. And all right, so we have a mismatch, cannot convert integer to string. So what I'm seeing here is I bet you if I look at this, yep, I know what I did. All right, so funny story. When you're working with multiple outputs from a REST API, you'll see in this response that there's status code, body, and string. One of the things I had forgotten to do was go into this XML field and essentially say, hey, this is the body I'm working with. And so if you ever are working with a XML extract right after a TREST client and you run into that problem, chances are you forgot to do what I just did. So let's save it off and let's run it. All right. Good. And now we have our IDs. So there was the problem that we needed to fix. So now I can easily just delete that, take this row, go to main. Actually, I need to reactivate this, activate it, row, main, put it here. Now, I also want to finish what is going to happen here. So if you kind of see, I had the condition if it's true, and then I can also then create the status code, or set the API, if you will, to what it's going to be when it's false. So I'm just going to grab this from my notes, because it's a very long...
You don't want to type that?
Nope, I do not want to type that.
Come on, Nick.
It is very long, as you can see, but it's again, so what I've said is essentially if I'm adding a user, make the call to add.
Right. So if you look at the string too, Nick is as well, in case you missed my section of this, taking advantage of context variables within the string very nicely so that it's dynamic at runtime. So we're checking to see if there's a question on Facebook.
Yep, so it says, is anyone facing problems in live streaming like loading in between questions? Just tell me. So Sai, are you struggling with the stream itself? Like, is it timing in and out? Not seeing anything drop. Might be something on your end. But one thing that we should note that is we're going to be recording, like we'll download these, we'll make sure that they're available for anyone to watch. At the same time, we'll probably chop them up into little consumable pieces so you don't have to watch the full hour-and-a-half live stream. All right, so sorry, Mark was kind of getting into the context variables that you see here and using them and also being able to interact with these rows that we're working with, which reminds me I'm going to have to go into this and say that it is row 7 dot user underscore ID, and I think that we're good here. All right, so now let's try running this and see what we get. All right, another error, which means it's expecting in the token. Exactly, I know what's going on here. So, all right. So how I'm going to break this apart to kind of start testing it is let's take out this multiple case because we can probably just add users today, and we'll make sure that this works before I add the complexity of the ternary operator. So let me kind of come in here and take that out. Right? So let's make sure that at least it's able to work with row 7 ID, user ID, session code, and that. Maybe I was biting off a bit more, being a bit brash, but
not you, Nick.
Not me. Never. Go big or go home. And so let's try it to make sure.
That the big data beard shop.
Ooh, all right. You hear the call out here. All right. So in this particular case, now you can see that I was able to at least get the successful rows in place. So if I wanted to go back and figure out what I'm doing, we can, because I really think it's pretty cool that we can do this. So I'm going to just take the entire string. Yep. Oh yeah. So we're going to take the entire string here, and I'm going to replace it in this URL, because I'm sure it had something to do with me copying and pasting. But then I'm going to go change some of these things so that we actually reference the row 7 data correctly, which is the user ID. You know, you get a little nice and you're naming things in your first run, and then you kind of realize that, oh yeah, maybe I need to do this. So all right, so it's row4.status, and we can confirm that with status, which is good. Want to make sure that it's equal to add the condition if it's true. So we're going to say that I'm going to add this row7.user ID, and we're going to confirm that that is actually the column here. Yep, which is perfect. Make sure those pluses are in place. Then we're going to go, so I have my context, which is my session token that I specified earlier, and now this is the failure condition, right? So if it's wrong, which means I want them to be removed, I still have my context role ID right, my users. Again, need to set this to row7.user ID. User ID, underscore ID. There's still the pluses there. I'm seeing the session token, and we're good. So let's save that, and let's try it again. Perfect. Boom, boom, and look at that.
Hey, it worked, Nick.
You know, it's...
Hey, can I access my the
Not yet.
Lithium log yet?
You actually could. You actually
Are you going to
could.
make me that admin now?
So if, yeah, I'm going to take this off screen as I log into community.talend.com, just so that I can show you what we essentially were doing inside Lithium. So give it a second as it loads. Waiting for...
Did they see that?
No, not yet. I wanted to log in first. And of course, our community portal is taking a minute to load.
I'm sure it's the Wi-Fi here that we're sucking up with our streaming video.
It's true. So I'll wait for that to load as we build the next thing, because, hey, it's great that you were able to do all of this. But what I want to do now is I'm going to pull it down and grab some stuff. So essentially I'm going to come in here, I'm going to take that response because I want to know the success, and we're going to do another extract fields. And in this case, I want to know, was I able to status of role change, right? And it helps to spell.
Ask me for help on that one.
All right, status of role change. So when kind of come in here, I can look for my job, that the response status is success. So I know that I need to be looking at every response that comes in. And then I'm going to add a column, and this is going to be the status. Now, in this particular case, as you saw with some of the previous XPaths, I could just name the element. But in this particular case, it's actually an attribute of the response XML. So I need to say at status, I believe. Right? Yep, at status to get that component in place. And so now I have that information. The last thing I'm going to want to do is now run this to a tmap, because what I'm going to want to build is essentially a nice little report, right? And so I'm going to grab two of these. One of these is, actually I'm going to create my output first, and we're going to say that this is the tabled output. Okay. And I'm going to want a couple of these things. So this is actually, I want to know the address that I'm working with, and so it's underscore email address. That's going to be one of my variables. And then this is going to be row4.status is another variable. Now what I want to set it up is like, look, here's the username, or the email address. Here's the operation requested. requested. And then the third piece is the status, right? And so what I can kind of come in here is say, look, this is the email address for the row I was working with. This is the operation I required. Here's actually what I wanted it to say. And I can hit apply, hit OK, and now I very quickly am getting stuff into that row format. If I want to generate this table, do a tabled output to a tlog row, as you've seen me do in the past. Now, I'm going to come in here, and I'm actually going to tell it, I have like that basic mode I've been putting stuff in, but I can also go into like a table view as well, which will help kind of set some things nice. And I'm going to drag this down so it's not sitting on top of the other job. And we can run this one more time to get the last pieces of it together. All right. So what did I do? String status, hit apply, hit OK. Let's clear that out. Let's run the job again. All right. Mod has compile errors. Mismatch, cannot convert integer to string. Again, I keep forgetting that. It's me. It's the bodies, man.
More coffee, Nick.
More coffee. I think if anything is the point, make sure you're using the body. All right. And let's run through this one more time. It's always good when these are the quick fixes like that. Like, oh, hey, I got to use the body.
I thought mine was complicated, but yours is definitely much more complicated.
Right. So as you can see here, I can have a nice detailed report coming out of this that's saying like, hey, here's the email addresses. Here's what I wanted to add. Here's that. So I can log in. Let's hopefully go to the community admin portal. All right, I'm going to pull this over. We're going to push this up, go to the users. I'm going to edit users. This is a good way to kind of look at it. And let's look for myself. Select the user. And now you can kind of see I have the Cognizant board, which is what we were trying to set up for our partners, this particular partner. So very quickly, if I wanted to remove it, I could instead of run it again. But this is how easy it is to kind of set these things up. So again, to summarize this job, the first step that we had to use with Lithium was to connect via their login APIs, extract the session ID, mess with it to get it into the context variables that we wanted to work with. And then the second job was actually start working with the user file that we have, finding the user based on their email, extracting the user ID, adding or removing permissions based on what status we wanted it to do, grab the status of the role change, and then log the information out onto the screen. Any questions about some of the stuff we were doing with REST APIs or XML extraction or things like that? No? Okay. Let's drop us in. Ooh, no.
Wrong key, man.
All right. Let me pull this back up. All right. So, yeah, I know, right?
Always hogging the camera.
Such a diva, man. So, to kind of reiterate, we spent a lot of time today going over what Talend Open Studio could do, talked about some of the projects that we're working on within our organization, trying to help out IT. We joke that it's shadow IT, but essentially, helping them out is always a good thing.
So there are actually 2 live projects that we're using.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's really powerful to hit just the capabilities of what an open source tool like Talend Open Studio for data integration can do, and from that, we have some fun stuff that we want to announce as well. So you saw today, Mark and I put together some great little applications that could help IT that were really driven by open source technology. And so we've been working really close with our chief marketing officer and other people to kind of come up with a way of highlighting and incentivizing individuals who are building jobs to solve IT challenges using Talend Open Studio. And so we can't announce everything just yet, but there's a competition that's going to be put in place with a cash prize for individuals that come up with really cool jobs like this. Now, how you'll enter is we'll create a post on the community board, which will allow you to kind of put the zip file of what you're going, like of the job you've built, give an explanation.
So what he means by a zip file is you can export.
You're stealing my thunder, Mark.
Oh, sorry.
So How you would do that, for those of you maybe never worked with this before, is if I go into the live lithium example, I can come here and I can export these items. And what you would do in this particular case is define the zip or an archive of what you want to build.
By the way, they're not seeing that, they're seeing us.
Oh, you're right. Again. All right. So what you can see here, I'm going to go back and do this again. I realize there's a delay. Is export these items. I can come in here, I can select what I want to do. So let's say in this particular case I wanted to take the lithium user modification. I could specify an archive and just say...
So you need the archive, not the directory, is what you're exporting?
Yep.
And the other important thing is also should always check the dependency box there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have context variables that didn't show up initially, it'll pull in those, any metadata connections, things like that. So
Yep.
Always very important.
Now the one thing I would clear out of that though, for this competition, do not send us your dependencies for context in the case if you have like username and password. We don't want that.
Please don't.
Right, so I'm checking that off because we don't want that. What we are going to review is just the job to make sure that it exists inside Talend. Now, I'm working with the executive team here at Talend to make sure that they will be the reviewers, and so we'll kind of come up with some picks. But we're really excited to offer this type of competition of kind of this open source IT tool belt.
Do I get to enter?
No, we do not get to enter. No one at Talend gets to enter. This is for our community. So with that in mind,
I think I'll have my sister enter.
She's
a librarian at the University of Iowa. She'll submit some cool jobs.
Right, no, that does not work either. Our families are not included either, so sorry, Dad. Sorry, my uncles, if you're watching this. But in order to participate, you need to join the Talend community. And so you kind of have that here at community.talend.com. If you haven't already, it's a great place. We'll be posting something like this. I think Paula. Yeah. Sorry,
Yes.
Paula. You cannot enter.
But we are getting the sticker packs out to
Yes.
everybody. I know that some people from the first session are still waiting for the sticker packs, and we're working on it.
Right.
Paula.
Sorry about that. Which is this? Which is the stickers. If you'd like some stickers, and maybe even we might do a raffle to get a nice T-shirt that we have.
You won't have the staff on the back like ours. They
Right.
can't see
Yeah,
us.
they can't have the staff. The URL, you probably have a different one that has been posted. Follow that one for episode 2, which would be great. Otherwise, I think that's it. So, as we were talking about, next episode is on Microsoft. I'm really excited about that. We have some cool stuff that we're working with Microsoft on. Stick around for that. That should be popping in about 2 weeks if we keep our schedule right. But yeah, I think that's about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you for my name's Nick,
I'm Mark.
and we'll see you at next summer camp.